Joining us today is Dr. Craig Wright, currently the chief scientist of nChain. We'll be talking about nChain today, BSV and BTC, and Craig's involvement with the founding of Bitcoin. As you may be aware, Craig has claimed to be the founder of Bitcoin and Satoshi himself. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you, Dr. Wright.
Thank you. Good to meet you, David.
Before we talk about the specific projects that you're involved with currently and the case with Dave Kleiman, let's talk about your personal and professional background, starting with your computer science work, leading up to your involvement with BTC.
Oh, that goes back a long, long way. I mean, I was involved in the early days of the internet, worked for a number of ISPs, then worked for the Australian Stock Exchange for a while before starting my own information security companies and other such things. I'm a part-time academic, part-time student, part-time sort of entrepreneur and a few other things. So a bit of all the above. I still haven't made it out of university and I'm 51.
So you have been pretty vocal about the fact that you created Bitcoin and that you are a Satoshi. Prior to your claims, nobody really knew who Satoshi really was. The internet speculated it might be a group of people, or an organization, even an entity. Individuals, we don't really know. So tell us about your involvement with Bitcoin's white paper.
Well, I wrote it, but that's not actually correct. In 2015, Wired and Gizmodo put a whole lot of claptrap out, outing me. I didn't want that out, and a number of other people in Core did that to basically muddy the waters about what I was doing. I mean, then they came out with a whole lot of stuff about fake degrees, etc., which is all proven wrong. But I didn't really want to face sort of media or any of that at the time. So,
okay. Well, there have been a number of other people that speculators would say have also been involved with the creation and writing of the white paper. Hal Finney, Dave Kleiman. Can you comment on those names?
No, there have not been any. There have been people who were involved in the early days of Bitcoin. So Dave was a friend of mine who I've sent things to, but when he was alive, and also my uncle and others were as well. Now, Hal Finney received the white paper, but everyone received the white paper when I released it and distributed it in October 2008. Now, Hal was instrumental with a number of things, but there's a difference between helping after a product's launched and creating it. So, I mean, I can give a lot of praise to everything Hal did in the early days, but that's very different to helping me create the thing.
You claim to have written the white paper. So what was the inspiration behind writing that paper? And what did you hope to achieve by creating a peer-to-peer network? One of the first of its kind, should I add?
Well, it's actually not the first of its kind. I mean, there have been many digital cash systems before. The distinction was none of them have survived sort of legal issues or scaling issues, etc. So the Mojo Nation's PeerNet, Payment, apart from eCash, were all around in the between the early and late 90s and even into the early noughties. So this whole nothing existed, that's actually wrong. Now, Bitcoin, though, was designed as a low-cost payment system. So that's where people go wrong in all this BTC stuff and the hype. The reality is Bitcoin can scale immensely. I mean, where I want to take it by the end of the decade is into billions of transactions per second, not millions, billions. And the cost per transaction should be under 1,000th of a cent, US cent. Now, if it's more than that, then it's not really going to be adequate for what we're doing with IoT and other such things. So the simple answer is I wanted to create a system that fulfilled the holy grail of the internet problem at the time that Google, Facebook, everyone were trying to solve, which they ended up just taking ad money and selling out, which is how do you monetize the internet? And the way that you monetize the internet is small micropayments.
Okay. And well, it's been more than a decade since the white paper was first released. Do you think that Bitcoin has evolved into, I guess, an asset that you envision it to be or become?
It doesn't really evolve. It just the scale will increase, etc. Any protocol
Evolve in terms
that is
of its,
successful.
sorry, let me clarify. Evolve in terms of its use case, in terms of its adoption, in terms of what people are using it for right now.
So everything that was there was already there. I mean, all of the scripts that I put into Bitcoin in 2009, there's no evolution. All of that's possible. So just like TCP as a protocol hasn't changed in 40 years, and yet you have the internet evolving. We're talking over Zoom using a 40-year-old base protocol. Right. So none of that should change. Anyone who tells you that you need to change to innovate on protocols is totally moronic, because there are no protocols in human existence that are more than 5 years, that haven't been around for at least 5 years that continue. So this whole "you need to innovate" protocol is actually wrong. Okay. The protocols that change die.
All right. Well, how did you come up with Satoshi Nakamoto, that name, the pseudonym?
So my grandfather and myself were very heavily into Japanese culture, and I had friends who were Japanese as well. My grandfather was under MacArthur in the Philippines back in World War One. Oh, sorry, yes. World War Two, and as part of all of that, he had a lot of integration with the Japanese. He was spoke a very good Tuscan dialect and went over there as part of MacArthur's team, pretending to be Italian, actually, so on the Axis forces, and interacted daily with a lot of Japanese people in the Philippines for years, preparing for MacArthur's return. He actually studied under Marconi, and that was part of his communications background. So Nakamoto, Tomodachi Nakamoto, is a Japanese scholar from the Tokugawa period. And in my opinion, at least, he was the Japanese equivalent of an Adam Smith. Not many people know who he is. So there are a number of different reasons behind it.
Let's talk about the case with Dave Kleiman, and we'll talk about, we'll dig into a little bit more detail your involvement with the white paper. So Kleiman versus Craig Wright was a case. It's still ongoing. You won the previous case. The Miami jury ruled in favor of your side. Tell us about that case.
So it's actually Dave's brother, Ira Kleiman. So when Dave passed away, I didn't know that he had a brother. And the brother that I didn't know about, I actually found out from his father eventually that he existed. So that case was about a greedy person who wanted a lot of money, who was actually offered several $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, etc., that I didn't need to even offer him, that he turned down because he wanted more. He wanted everything to be liquidated. So I guess greedy people get what they deserve.
So let's walk through some of the important highlights of the case. So it was a legal battle between the two parties, yourself and the Kleiman estate. 1.1 million Bitcoins was the stake. It was ruled in favor of yourself. Again, you did not owe half of that stake to the Kleiman estate because it was ruled that Kleiman was not directly involved with the white paper's founding. Am I correct so far? Are those facts correct?
Yes. So basically, the court determined that I'm the only person who created Bitcoin. That was a sole endeavor, not joint. The case was actually not only over the Bitcoin, but also over the rights to the database and a number of other parts. So at one stage, I think the total that they were suing me for was around $600 billion US, which Correct. Gets a little bit ridiculous.
Well, the jury did award $100 million of intellectual property to a joint venture between the two parties. Can you comment on that?
So it awarded it to W&K. Now, W&K was a venture between my former wife, myself, through a company that is now owned by my current wife, and David Climate. Yes. So the reality there is my former wife and my current wife own 2/3 of that company. So eventually I'll have to pay extra money to my ex-wife.
Critics of the case, or critics of your work, would say that the jury ruled that Kleiman was not involved with the founding of Bitcoin. But just because Kleiman wasn't involved, it doesn't prove that you were involved, right? How would you respond to critics?
I wouldn't. At the end of the day, the case was about the creation of Bitcoin. The jury was also given a fraud thing. So if I didn't do it, then it would have been fraud. So the jury ruled against that. So technically, sorry, that's incorrect.
Well, could you comment on the evidence that you presented to the jury to convince them that you were indeed the sole creator and owner of the 1.1 million Satoshi coins?
I mean, it's beyond that. It goes into my whole life. I mean,
yes.
Everything going up to it. I mean, my background, my history, the things I was working on before, the education that I took myself through, the fact that I left in January of 2009 and started the first Bitcoin-based company on Earth, the tax problems that I then had fighting the Australian Tax Office, trying to convince them that Bitcoin wasn't a hobby in 2009, etc.
Right. Okay. Well, Dr. Wright, again, critics, I'm not saying, one way or the other, but critics would argue that if you were Satoshi, one way to prove it is just to simply move the original Satoshi coins. Why haven't you done that yet?
Because that's not a way of proving it. Those aren't critics. Basically, these are people who support Ross and others with the whole anarchist movement that Bitcoin was designed to crush. Mm-hmm. So these are people who want things like Silk Road. The arguments that they're making are that these are the same people who, if I moved the coins, would say that I stole them. So, okay. I mean, you can't, that's not how digital signatures work. So right. You can't do it that way.
Well, you have gone on the on internet forums and threatened to dump your Bitcoin holdings. I mean, look, 1.1 million Bitcoin is worth roughly $50 to $60 billion.
That's actually not what I've done.
Okay. Well, can you clarify on exactly, because there were comments speculating that you would threaten to dump your Bitcoin, then move the market. Can you clarify as to what you meant by that?
I am on one internet forum, which is Slack, on one single Slack. I mean, that's the only place I talk. The Twitter is run, account that I have at the moment is run by staff. I don't have Facebook. I don't have any of these other things. I know there are hundreds of accounts on Telegram and things like this that are saying that they're me. Mm-hmm. I don't use social media. So, what I'll do with my holdings, well, they're actually corporate holdings. Right back in 2009, I set up companies and trusts, etc. So this was never some anarchist thing, contrary to what people try and tell you. Bitcoin is nothing to do with cypherpunk. Bitcoin was never released on a cypherpunk mailing list. Anyone who tells you that is either stupid or lying. There's no other. I mean, not once in human history was Bitcoin, when I was around, mentioned on a cypherpunk mailing list, ever.
I have talked to some analysts who said that one of the threats of the Bitcoin price today, well, actually for all crypto markets, because so far a lot of altcoins do follow the price of Bitcoin. But one of the threats is that the whales, the large holders of Bitcoin, not just yourself, but other people as well, could unload on the market and move at will. Is that something that is a threat that you agree with? Is that something that you think could potentially move the markets down significantly?
Well, number one, it's not a market by definition. We're talking about a number of bucket shop exchanges. None of them are regulated. None of them are legal. I mean, even Coinbase. Basically, we have a bunch of pirates pretending to actually say markets. Then we're talking about people wanting to speculate. The only thing that should drive any price is fundamentals, and that should be use. I mean, it's a commodity system. So how many transactions per second is it doing? Where is it going into? What is it developing into? And quite frankly, if you're speculating and you don't even understand this, then you shouldn't be in this inverted comma market. Next,
Right.
It's not crypto. There's no encryption in Bitcoin. When I designed it, it's clear text. It's actually designed not to be crypto. Mojo Nation, eCash, they were actually cryptographic protocols. They're crypto. Bitcoin's digital cash, so it's anti-crypto.
Okay. Well, suppose you do control the 1.1 million Bitcoins. Is that something you're planning to do, to sell a big portion of that? Once you do decide to activate the keys, is that market participants might be wondering about or concerned about a potential unload from yourself, which may move the markets. It is a big portion of the, again, I'm just using the term market loosely.
If you're talking BTC,
yeah,
then yes, I'll eventually sell it because, I mean, it has no utility.
Let's comment on that, yeah. So you think
Bitcoin
BTC
I'll
has
keep
no...
because I need...
Sorry,
well, no,
BTC
it has no
utility. Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I'm talking about in Bitcoin, I'm talking about a protocol that will go 10, 100 billion transactions a second at a rate that will undercut Amazon for transactions by 100 times. Literally. By the end of this decade, I'll have a protocol running that will be cheaper than Amazon. 99% of Amazon's cost cheaper. That has value. That is more secure, faster, able to handle everything Amazon does, and better. That's my aim.
What is the network what is this that you're working on right now?
Bitcoin. You'll say BSV, but that's only a ticker symbol. So I'll say Bitcoin. When I released Bitcoin, I also said the protocol set in stone. So when people tell you about changing protocol, the protocol doesn't change at all. Okay.
So let's, for the viewers out there who may not be familiar with the terminologies, BSV is Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, different ticker from BTC. Now, differences between the two from a technological standpoint. Can you elaborate?
Bitcoin, what you're saying BSV, is the same protocol I launched in 2009. It scales. It does everything Ethereum does. It always did. On the other hand, BTC is trying to make itself into a, cryptocurrency slowly, which it's not yet. They're trying to make it anonymous. They're trying to make it anti-government, anti-bank, anti-everything. And none of what they're doing will ever scale. So they're trying to have this silly idea of every person on Earth running a node, which is just asinine, and not understanding that it's about digital cash, not some concept about being able to buy drugs or anything like this.
BSV is the original Bitcoin. It's not a fork of BTC as some articles would claim.
No, Bitcoin doesn't fork. So anyone saying that is basically trying to mislead people.
What do you mean it doesn't fork? Can you comment on that?
When I released Bitcoin in 2010, I also said, look, I have reasons for keeping the protocol the same, etc. Now, Bitcoin was never a community project that way, contrary to what people try and tell you. Right. People have run around in the last few years trying to change the narrative. Now, it's all about scale. The only thing that wins is scale. At the end of the day, by the end of the next 12 months, what I want to do, just as a little side exercise, we're going to run every other blockchain protocol on Earth on BSV. So we're going to run the entire Ethereum network, the entire IBM Hyperledger network, BTC, Polkadot, Hashgraph, etc. We're going to run them all for free. We're going to run the entire crypto industry, and it will be a fraction of the network, just to show how stupidly asinine these other things are.
How do you plan to scale Bitcoin? Well, improve the scaling qualities of Bitcoin, let's say.
The original design I had for Bitcoin actually did scale. I was reading one of the core developers was saying how when I first launched Bitcoin, I did a whole lot of stupid things, like I used Berkeley database. Berkeley database was a big fat database that was designed for different applications, not like Bitcoin. Well, I didn't design Bitcoin to run on Raspberry Pis. I designed Bitcoin for things like Berkeley database. Berkeley DB handles up to about 4.3 petabyte data blocks in 2009. So petabytes is the ability to take things way, way bigger than Bitcoin happens to be. It's not millions, but billions of transactions a second. So Bitcoin was designed to scale from day one. The whole purpose of peer-to-peer was not what people are telling you now, where Alice connects to a network connects to Bob. Peer-to-peer means Alice connects directly to Bob, and Bob settles on the blockchain.
Right.
And that's why I had IP-to-IP connectivity that has been taken out.
One thing I've noticed is that BSV doesn't trade like other large cryptos. BTC, Ethereum, I'm talking about cryptos with large trading volumes. The price moves by itself. It doesn't really correlate with some of these other coins. Can you comment as to why?
Because the criminals don't like us.
Okay. Let's talk about the future developments of some of the projects that you're working on. So advancements in BSV you've talked about. What about Enchain? What do you hope to accomplish here?
So we've got about 1,600 patents filed already. That's going to keep going. The research that we're doing in-house will keep building. We're going to scale into secure tickets, things like train tickets, bus tickets, etc. Secure money transfer. One of the things I really want to see is digital cash for places like Africa, Asia, etc. Because right now, if you look at M-Pesa, it's 30 to 40 cents a transaction. That's terrible. I mean, people earning a few dollars an hour, every time they want to transact, having to pay that amount of money, it's horrible. Now, if we can take it down to fractions of a cent on central bank digital currencies with some of these nations, we're talking with a number of African nations at the moment. This will open up a lot of opportunities for people in those places, not only to trade locally, but even globally. So someone with skills in computer programming, graphic art, will be able to start trading with America, with Britain, et cetera, and earn money instantly. Now, if you think about someone earning a few dollars an hour and paying 30 cents even for a transaction, now taking that down and making it a fraction, under a tenth of a cent for a monetary transaction on currency, then that's a significant change to their lives. So that's one of the big areas I want to push.
All right. Before we let you go, biggest developments in blockchain technology that you see happening right now. Well, let's start with the metaverse. What do you think about the metaverse? Tokens that would be used, utilizations. What's your take?
Well, 2 years ago, Enchain has filed patents and did what we called MetaNet. And like everything else Facebook does, it's nice to see that none of their stuff worked, so they sold it all off, and now they're suing us as well. Why? Because, well, we have patents that work and they don't. So.
All right. Okay. Well, what about the adoption of BTC as legal tender and perhaps maybe even some other tokens by countries like El Salvador? There's speculation that other countries would follow. Do you think crypto should be made legal tender in countries?
Well, it hasn't, actually. I mean, that's actually false news. Legal tender is a specific thing, meaning in law that you need to take that for any exchange or any owed money. That's not actually the way that the El Salvadorian law is written. Now, on top of that, there's no exchange of BTC. What there is a country wallet. If you analyze the amount, the country's actually, with the leverage, probably lost 60% of the investment. So it's a horrible investment for the people there. And worse than that, the analysis of the amount of money being done in to out means that the wallet's probably leveraged about 10 to 1 at the moment. So what we have is the El Salvadorian government has leveraged sort of the amount of money that they're putting into this, so that the Presidente is likely expelling it out the other side in other countries. So we've seen that. We saw that in Malaysia a few years ago, where there was $4 billion taken out of the government coffers. And that's what I expect to see here as well. So,
okay. Well, final question. I'll let you go. Do you think BSV and some other projects that perhaps you're working on could help the underbanked around the world with accessing capital? A lot of people don't have access to a bank account even, and so people are saying blockchain
exactly.
is the answer.
So that's one of the bits that I was mentioning before. If we can make digital cash a lot cheaper, which we're working on, then those people can now save money. They can start trading. That gives them enough evidence to actually start building a history for banking as well. The other project is DeSoto in the past, welfare economists talked about if we could get people to have access to their property, they'll be able to get loans, etc. So if we can start recording information on the blockchain, people in shanty towns, small casual villages, etc., will be able to build up a history of ownership that will build into property records. So they're both property, both things we're working on. So.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Wright, good luck with these initiatives. I wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I hope to speak to you again and follow up on your case and the other projects that you're working on. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned for more.